Moment in History, Lewis and Clark. William Clark and Meriwether Lewis were a duo of explorers famous for their exploration of the American frontier. The Lewis and Clark expedition was the first American mission into the western United States. President Thomas Jefferson commissioned the expedition following the completion of the Louisiana Purchase. The Corps of Discovery, as the group was officially called, traveled west along the Missouri River from their starting point near St. Louis, Missouri, before crossing the Continental Divide. The Continental Divide consists of the Rocky Mountains and other peaks in the western U.S. Eventually, the Corps reached the Pacific Ocean on the coast of modern-day Oregon. The expedition lasted from May 1804 to September 1806. Guiding purpose. The main purpose of the voyage was to map, explore, and create an American presence in the western half of the continent. Further, Lewis and Clark were asked to find a crossable route across the wilderness to the west coast. President Jefferson considered this expedition to be of greatest importance because the United States had recently purchased a large amount of western land from the French. Also, the doctrine of manifest destiny was gaining support in the eastern United States. Reliable information about the unsettled West would need to be gathered for the young country to have a chance to spread across the whole continent. The Lewis and Clark expedition was the key to this knowledge. Native American interaction. As they made their way across the continent, the Corps had numerous encounters with Native American tribes. Some of these encounters were hostile. The group met strong resistance from the Lakota Sioux and the partisan tribes. However, the majority of the group's encounters with Native Americans were peaceful. In fact, many historians agree that if it were not for the aid of the Native Americans, the Lewis and Clark expedition probably would have failed. Most notably, a Shoshone woman named Sacagawea gave Lewis and Clark valuable advice as they made their way to the Pacific. Along with her husband, Sacagawea joined the expedition in the early months of 1805. From that point forward, the two served as guides and translators for the Corps. After the group made its way across the Continental Divide and down the Rocky Mountains by way of canoe, it reached the Pacific Ocean for the first time on November 7, 1805. The group then spent a winter camped out on the banks of the Columbia River before starting the journey back to St. Louis in March of 1806. Camping out. Along the trip out west, the Corps set up several forts where they made camp for weeks or even months at a time. These forts included Fort Mandan in North Dakota and Fort Clatsop in Oregon. In addition to mapping out the land and establishing an American presence in the West, Lewis and Clark were also charged with observing the wildlife, climate, and natives of the Western Territory. They carried leather-bound journals where they recorded their progress and wrote down any discoveries that they made along the way. They documented over 200 previously unknown plants and animals, although these were known to the natives, and over 72 Native American tribes. The Lewis and Clark expedition was one of the most significant westward voyages in American history. The Corps of Discovery were the first Americans to cross the Continental Divide, see Yellowstone, and reach the Pacific Ocean. More importantly, they provided detailed maps and descriptions of these regions. Although they did not find a crossable water route from the East Coast to the West Coast, they succeeded in reaching the Pacific Ocean and thoroughly documenting their travels. The knowledge that they brought back with them would prove to be instrumental in the U.S.'s further efforts to settle the western half of the continent.